Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird, and I got a great interview lined up for you today. What are we talking about? I don't know. Actually, I do know. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about fatherhood and a slew of other things with our very special guest today. My man, X, is on with me right now. X, what's happening, brother? How you doing?
Oh, man, it's so good to be here with you on the show.
Man, listen,
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Business guy, awesome father, author. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've done a lot of things in business, especially in sales. I speak around the country doing some training and things. But I got to tell you, the best job out there is just being a dad.
Yeah.
And so when people ask me what you do, I think I should say, well, I'm a dad.
Yeah.
And they can say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a dad.
Right.
They can keep pressing, and I can say, well, I also do a little work.
Yeah.
But I'm a dad, and that's what I'm most keyed in for and like doing. So
how many kids do you have?
5 kids, believe it or not.
Jeez, how do you do it, man? Not having the kids, but I'm like, how do you manage having the 5 kids?
I just got to tell you, it's just fun to come home and have kids run up to you and say, "Hey, man, you're back from work, Dad," and give you a big hug, and then spend time. I think it's just prioritizing. It's just saying, "Hey, I'm a dad first, and I'm a business person second."
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that your priorities are family, and then everything kind of else falls into place after that. So like the kids and family, that's kind of number one. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yeah, close. So I'm a man of faith too. So I feel like I need to, be that honor, be a man of faith first. After that, it's my family.
Yeah.
After that, it's probably finances. I wish I was as fit as you are, try fitness, finances, somewhere in there. But, trying to have probably faith, family, finances, fitness, somewhere in there.
X is being real nice right now. There's a reason why only people can see me from like the shoulders up. So that's why I do. Oh, man.
Well, there's only one of us that's worked out so far today, and it wasn't me. So
I love it. And I think I want to hit something because a man of faith real quick, because that's really important to me as well. And that's, in my opinion, and those of you that have been following me for years know that that's first and foremost, to put God first. And then everything else, you can figure it out, but you put your faith and everything first, God first. I've taught my son, hey, listen, it's like family first. Blah, blah, blah. No, I was like, no. Let me be clear on something, son. You put God first, then you, and then everything else. Dad's 3, 4. You put me wherever, but it's God first, then you, and then you decide what's your priorities are after that. So I bring that up because I want to commend you on that. I think that's great. There's not a lot of, especially in the world that we live in today. I think that it's very important to share that as much as we possibly can. It needs to get back out. We need to bring God back into the communities. We need to bring God back into everywhere else and talk about it and let people know, hey, this should be number one, and then everything else kind of falls into place after that. So thank you for saying that.
I appreciate that. And I think it's really true, though. If you really put God first, the other stuff falls in the line.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have questions about how to treat your family, how to treat your spouse, how to handle certain situations, that stuff, if you have God first, I think it just kind of falls into place.
Yeah.
If you have, something else first, you can get a little off kilter and out of whack.
Yeah. Amen. Well, let's talk. I want to talk family stuff here real quick.
Sure.
5 kids. What, if you don't mind me asking? I got to ask because I'm nosy. What age range?
Ages. So I've got 18 down to 5 right now. Can you believe that? So I've got one in college, and I've got them all the way down to kindergarten at the moment. So it's a large spread. We have a lot of fun. Sometimes things get tense, but also sometimes things are really fun. I mean, right. I love being a dad. Nothing better. And this is the interesting thing. If I can just say this, there's a lot of people these days, I think that, everyone wants to get higher on the social ladder. So people go out and work really hard so they can have a bigger house, so they can have a nicer car, so they can keep up with the Joneses. And here's the truth. I mean, let me ask you a question. Do you even know what your great grandfather did for a living? So that's your grandpa's grandpa. And I'll ask people this. I'm not, and people they'll be like, I have no idea. I have no idea what my great grandfather. Some people know. They're like, well, he was a rancher or a farmer. Or he was somewhere. But then here's my next question. I mean, do you care if he had the coolest horse? Do you care? Do you care if his plow was like a Mercedes-Benz plow? I mean, nobody cares, right? and here's the bad news the good news and the bad
news.
That's
so
true. Nobody, your great grandkids are going to care about as much about the car you drove as you care about what kind of plow your great grandfather had. But the kind of parent you are is literally going to affect them in ways that you can't even say. Now, I'll give you an obvious example. Let me give you one obvious example. I live in America. You live in America. Now, for me personally, the reason I live in America is because more than one ancestor of mine, decided to get on a boat from Europe and come to America.
Right.
Well, that one decision made hundreds of years ago affects me. It affects the language I speak. It affects my religion. It affects my economic opportunities. It affects my educational opportunities. So this decision that they made hundreds of years ago is still profoundly affecting me today.
Right.
Whereas what they did for a living, no, it's not. It doesn't matter if they were a shoemaker or a carpenter or a farmer or a banker. I mean, it doesn't matter. But that one decision that they made. But there are other decisions, I mean, that are just as real. I mean, were they kind?
Yeah.
Were they drunk? Were they checked in or checked out? That kind of stuff is less obvious, but it's just as real. And so there are things that are affecting me today that my great grandfather did that still affect me, that I probably don't even have any clue how it affects me, right. But it's there. It's real. Anyway, you got me going on some of that.
No, it's so cool. You got the wheels turning, because I started thinking about, like, I knew my great grandfather, and I remember my great grandfather. He died when I was really young, but what I remember of him, he used to walk with a cane, and he was very well known in the town. He always wore the man with the overalls, and they had a mural. Mural, is that what they call them? Like, it was painted on a wall in one of the buildings, and it was him, and he always walked with a cane, and he had overalls on, and he had a spit cup because he was a big chewer back then, right? So, but when I was a kid, he would sit on the chair. And you guys can't see this because this is a video, but he would lean on his cane. He'd lean forward on his cane. And if you walked in front of the TV as he was watching TV, he'd flip the cane up and poke you in the ribs. And that's I remember that of my great grandfather, excuse me. And I knew a little bit about, like, it was like great times 8 grandfather. So great whatever grandfather was the first white settler in our area in Wisconsin, and had married a Sioux woman, an Indian woman. And there's a statue that they erected of him down by one of the rivers down in our area where I grew up, and whatnot. And I would read about him and the type of man that he was, and I get to kind of look at how, family trees and stuff like that is always I've always kind of found that fascinating a little bit. Like, oh, where do you come from? Who was in your family tree? Who do you not want to be a part of? Kind of thing, kind of a thing. And it was just very interesting. So but you're right. I didn't care what kind of, plow they had, because my great grandfather, they didn't have, it was all horse and buggy, even for him back then, and it was just like, wow. And so that's pretty cool that you explain it that way. Let me ask you this, X.
By the way, I do, just interjecting, you're one of the few people, I think, who I've asked who can give some detail on what that is. So that's wonderful that you're that keyed in and know the history of your family that well. Yeah, I'll tell you, most of the people I've asked that to say, well, I have no idea.
I think it's it's important as a man to either. I've always wanted to know where it came from, right? And there's a part of me, like I grew up not knowing my biological father. So everything that I just told you was from my mom's side. My biological father, I didn't know. I know parts of him and the history of where he came from and whatnot. And I won't get into that, but it what I do know, kind of cool, and other parts of it, like, whoa, that's great. Now I know what I don't want to be, kind of a thing. And I think it's important as that we know where we come from, because you can learn from history, right? And I realize there's parts of history or where I've come from that I don't want to be like certain people that you see kind of coming down the line, like, hey, you're next up and you got to follow in these footsteps or whatnot. And I just, for me, if I know that I know where to stay away from. And I take all of that, and I guess in a long-winded, I say all of this because growing up, there were certain things that I learned from my parents, grandparents, and so forth that I didn't like, and that affected me. And I said, well, when I become a dad, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I want my son to or child to grow up. Son, I have a son, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make sure that I spend 15 minutes every night with him at least before he goes to bed, reading a book with him, asking about his day. My son turned 20 this past weekend, and at 20, even at 20 years old, and he's been in college, he's a sophomore in college, and when he started college, I've talked to him pretty much every day. I can count on one hand since he started college how many days that I haven't been able to talk to him. And that's only because he's in an ROTC program, and those were the days that he was out in the field doing something. Every other day, I have talked to him, and it's either me checking in. And it's not me checking in on him, but if I forget to call, he'll call me, and that's just the bond that we've established, I think, which is great, because I see so many fathers. I've seen a lot of fathers where you become a single parent and they're just like, no, nothing to do with your kid. And it's sad, because I think it's the great, and let me ask you this, X, greatest job in the world, being a father. You agree?
I 100% agree. 100% agree. And I'll tell you this, not only is it going to have a greater effect long-term than anything else we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go build a rock star business, and in 10 years, maybe 20 years, that business is probably going to be disrupted, bankrupted, bought, sold, totally irrelevant. I mean, but the influence I have in my own home with my own children, that can go on for centuries, really forever. But I'm saying it can go on so long. And so really to have that priority and say, you know what? Yeah, I have a job, but just so I can support the main job of being a parent. I mean, it's not the other way around. It's not like I'm just kind of a parent on the side and here's my job. It's I'm a parent. I have a job so I can support what I need to do as a father, or, in my case, my wife as well. And so, I think if you look at the statistics, even, I mean, you see a lot of kids. I mean, the truth is a lot of the kids who are in prison, a lot of the prisoners, a lot of them did not have dads that showed up.
Right.
They were either physically not there or emotionally, or both. A lot of times just both, where, kids really do our children need us to step up. They need us to be there. They need us to call and do like what you were saying, 15 minutes, and read to them and see how their day was, and make sure that they know that they're cared for. And that's kind of the message that I'm really passionate about getting that out. So for any dads listening, if you, there's so many good resources out there. I watched a good movie the other day. It's called Courageous. I think it was made by the Kendrick brothers. Such a good movie about just inspiring dads to step up. But anyway.
And I appreciate you mentioning that. I'm gonna have to check that out, because here's the thing. Most people know that I was a single father for many, many years, and the other party wasn't involved.
Mm-hmm.
And as a single parent, you have to play kind of both roles. And I was a military guy, so my softer side, if you will, wasn't very soft. I had to kind of learn, and it was a learning process for me as well. And I think one thing I learned about being a parent was, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I'm going to, is that I became dependent on my son being around. Like I enjoyed having somebody to take care of and watch out for and whatnot, because it distracted me from all the other stuff that I didn't want to deal with me personally, right? So when my son started high school, he went to a private school, and he was gone a little bit, and then when he started college, I didn't know what to do with myself, and it sucked, quite honestly, because I was like, man, my boy's not around. Like, I what am I supposed to do, right? But and I'm sure you can relate. You got one in college, and it doesn't matter. They're still yours. But then at the same time, hey, wait a minute. I recognize that you got to take a step back. Wait a minute. My job as a parent, as a father, is to give them a better opportunity than what I had, first and foremost. And two, when they get to that point where you got to let go of the reins, so to speak, get that. You don't have to necessarily. You're not walking in front of them and guide. Now you're walking beside them and you're letting them make their decisions. And I tell you what, sometimes you fathers out there, sometimes that's hard to kind of let go of the reins and let your kids grow up. But I tell you what, you gotta let your kids fall, because guess it's not your life, it's theirs, and you gotta let them make those mistakes. Be there to help and guide and whatnot. You're still the father, but it's also their life, and your job as a father is to, hopefully you were there and raised them to the point to where it was time for them to go out on their own. They had that solid foundation, right? Would you agree with that, X?
That's right. I would totally agree with that. I think you're a wise man. I really do.
Stop it now.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, it's a hard thing. I've experienced the same thing you've said, where it's like, okay, I hope I've taught him well.
Yeah.
Send him off to, I have a wonderful daughter. She's in college now. And,
was it hard for you to kind of send her off to college?
Oh goodness, cried my eyeballs out, man. Yeah, absolutely. One of the super hard.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're right. It's also awesome to see them kind of grow up, spread their wings. And one of the things I've been thinking about as well is just that when they're young, and I'm not sure I did a great job of this all the time, but it's almost better to let them fail when the stakes are low and then talk about it. What I'm saying is okay, this is kind of the rule of our home, but if you violate the rule, then there's this natural consequence and we can talk about it. And that way, if they fail a little bit when they're 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, then they can figure out that there are real consequences for things that have real meaning when they're 18 and 20, hopefully, and yeah. The consequences can be much bigger, So like, let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
As a dad. So let's just say I'm at the store and my kid decides to steal a candy bar and they're 5 or 6. Okay. And let's just say I'm in a hurry to get to my next work thing. Okay. So I'm thinking, okay, I've got to get this work appointment or whatever. And my kid takes a candy bar. Now, sounds like an innocent thing, right? But so let's just say I have this opportunity now to say, okay, we're going to go talk about, we don't steal.
Right.
You're going to have to go give it back. And yeah, it's going to be embarrassing. And you're going to have to admit that you took it. And you're going to maybe even I might even have to, have you earn some money to pay or whatever it is, have them have a real consequence there. Because the truth is, I could just say, well, we're in a hurry, let's just go. And the long-term consequence could be that they could learn not to steal much later in life when they're 18, and then they're 20 and they end up going to jail and they end up having a record and they end up. So me taking the time when they're 5 or 6 to talk about, hey, this is how we don't steal. We respect people's property. You have to pay for things. That's a moment where, I'm going to march them back in, make them give it back or whatever it is, but they're going to learn, when they're 5 years old and the stakes are low. Right. The stakes are much higher when you're 20
or
18.
Yeah.
I mean, You want to have a record because your dad didn't teach you. And the truth is, a lot of the guys in prison never had a dad that just stepped up and said, hey, son, we're going to treat people with respect. We're going to be honest. We're not going to steal. We're going to try to use the golden rule. Or what I mean, just talking about it consistently when they're young has immense payoffs later for your kids. You know what I'm saying? So we have this opportunity to help. I mean, and the truth is, I got to tell you, I'm in a unique situation. My mom died when I was 8 years old, and I watched her die. So she died after a little league game. She had a cerebral hemorrhage. She was just gone. I mean, from being healthy to gone. And I can tell you, and I'm decades later, more than 36 years later. Okay. I can tell you little things my mom did, little things I knew she thought or said that still profoundly affect me today. And they're affecting her grandkids who she didn't meet. And I believe they'll affect her grandkids and her great-grands. So little things she did that she probably didn't even think about are having an immense effect decades later, generations later. And I'm telling you, that's the same way as with dads. I mean, spend time with them, let them know you care about them, teach them correct principles. That stuff is super valuable. Anyway, you got me going.
No, man, it's easy for guys like us to talk about it because we're passionate about our kids, and the sad truth of it is I know a lot of guys that aren't, and it's frustrating for me, and I guess I've said it like this before where it's like, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I think if I've done anything right in life at all, anything, I got that. Even if I don't, from this point on, and I don't do anything else the rest of my life, I can honestly say I got one thing right, at least. And that was my son. Yeah.
I heard this saying, a wise man said something like this. He said, no success can compensate for failure in the home.
Yeah.
If you're being a good dad, and do you hear that? No success. I mean, you could go out and conquer the world with business. If you're not being a good dad,
it doesn't. Nothing.
It's not worth it.
Nothing matters, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And again, that's my opinion. You can have all the money in the world, and if you were a douchebag for a dad, were you really successful? No,
that's right.
No, because your kids are missed out. Anyway, yeah. Listen,
love it.
X, you wrote a book for your kids, right?
I did.
What's it called?
It's called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die.
Okay, hold that. Where can people, so for the listeners right now that are loving this and whatnot, how can they get that book? Where can they find it? Well,
they can go to my website, which is EksAyn.com. I have this wild first name, EksAyn, EksAyn.com, or they could just find it on Amazon. What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die.
EksAyn.
Yeah, sorry, EksAyn.
I love it. I love it. We're going to make sure that that's in the show notes and stuff, folks, too, as well. So what prompted, let me ask you this, what prompted you to write the book? Why?
Well, I'll tell you what prompted I told you a little earlier, my mom died when I was young, and she was good. She kept some journals, and I treasure those journals, but there were oftentimes growing up, I would have loved to have just had more of her wisdom, more of like what she would have thought of different things. And I thought to myself, why don't I write a book? Because the truth is, my mom was 32 years old. She was healthy. She just had a cerebral hemorrhage, which burst her, and she was gone. And, we all think, hopefully we'll live to be old and be able to see our grandkids and things. But anything could happen. Something could happen today that could end our lives, And so I thought, I think it's important for me to let my kids know some of the most important things, so they have something from dad. Now, I also did it in part because, you were talking about, I'm a little bit on a mission to just inspire dads to step up, because it's such an opportunity, man. And it's not out like, out of guilt, like you should step up. It's like, look at this opportunity you have to really make a difference in the world as a dad. Yeah. Can it be scary? Sure. I mean, it's swimming in deep waters. I mean, you've got what you do really, really matters, and so that's the good news and the bad news. But, be brave, step up, try to be a dad. So I guess the reason I published it publicly was to kind of just, for my children mainly, so they could see, and that, and also to perhaps inspire dads to say, hey, let's do the best we can. We've got this opportunity that's bigger than any business opportunity, bigger than any other opportunity to influence long-term, to be a force for good in the world and our kids. And the stuff that isn't seen, I mean, some of the best parenting moments, nobody else knows except for you and your son. You know what I mean? Yeah. Except and me and my children, like a lot of times it's just sitting in the car having a good chat, or it's, taking them down to the grocery store while you're picking up some milk and you have something comes up and you have a good time. I mean, it's not like these fanfare moments, it's just the little moments that occur along the way where you're driving in the car and you have a good chat, or, family vacations sometimes are really great to take them on vacation and see new things, and so many good opportunities. So I guess that's why I wrote the book. Those two reasons.
Folks, again, you can find it on his website. I'm going to spell it out. EksAyn.com, or you can find it on Amazon as well. What I Want My Kids to Know. That's the name of the book. Yes.
Yeah. What I want my children to
know. What I want my children to know. Excuse me. What I want my children to know.
To know before I die.
Before I die. Okay. So check that out. And again, we're talking about the fatherhood side of things right now, and it's so important, because imagine what the world would be like right now if all fathers were involved in their kids' life. And that's not a guilt. That's not a guilt on anybody. It's really not. It's there's a problem in the world, and here's the thing. I was a high school substitute teacher in an inner city area, and they asked me to do the what they call it, the in-school suspension teacher, because of my military background and whatnot, and the student to teacher ratio was 30-1. My first day in class, I had 52 students in my class, and all the majority of them, and everybody thinks, and all the teachers like, oh, you got all the bad kids, blah 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 blah. And after a couple of weeks, they're not bad kids. It's because their parents weren't involved in their lives, and nobody was listening to them. And then all of a sudden, they wanted discipline, and it was kind of like I ruled with the first few hours of the day. I kind of ruled with the instill the fear of God, and then was like, you can't talk, don't look forward, do this, do this, and it was kind of like really, really hard. And then at noon, when they had lunch, after that, I'd sit back in my chair and be like, all right, you stand up, tell me your name and why you're here and what you want to do with your life. And I'd start getting to know them individually. And that triggered something, because after those kids would no longer, and I tell them at the end of the day, I better not see you ever again in this class. Don't waste your time coming here. Be a good person, blah, 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 blah. Come and ask me for advice or whatnot. I don't mind that. Do it on your lunch break. Don't skip class. All of a sudden, these kids would start coming back into my class middle of the day, and I'd tell them, hey, I thought I told you not to come back here anymore. And they're like, oh, no, I'm just here on my lunch break, Mr. Berg. Can I sit in? And they'd want to talk and ask questions and whatnot. And the more I got to know these kids, the more I realized it wasn't, a lot of these kids had jobs and they were working till 2-3 o'clock in the morning to support their families. And we're talking kids that are 15, 16 years old. And I was like, where are your parents? Parents don't have jobs, so I got to support the family. Wait, you serious? Like, really? And I guess I'm saying all this because it's like our jobs as parents is to, at least my opinion is, I always thought that our job as parents was to give our kids a better life than we had, and instill values in them, the rights and wrong, and just to be a good human being to other people. That's what I thought.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
No,
there.
that's it. Please. No,
I 100% agree with you. And one of the things that occurred to me while you were saying that, I've read a little bit about this, that kids actually, they can't say it, and they don't even know if they can even, if they're conscious of it. But imagine being in a dark cave and you're trying to figure out where you're at, and you come up against this wall and you push on the wall and you're like, okay, I found the side of the cave here. This is good. And then you push on it and it crumbles. When it crumbles, are you more, that would be a little disconcerting. Kids, like you said, here you were a strong figure in that class, and you're telling people these are the boundaries. And I think a lot of these kids didn't have the security of having good boundaries. So when you actually don't want the wall to crumble, you want your dad to be able to say, no, we're going to treat people with respect. We're not going to steal. We're going to keep the golden rule. We're going to treat women with respect. We're going to treat others with respect. We're going to do these things. And when they push against that wall, and they almost just want it to be there. And I think one of the reasons the kids kept coming back to you is they could feel like, you know what, this he's solid. Like, I can push against it. And I realize he still cares about me, but like, he's not budging.
Right.
And they didn't have that, because if mom or dad is always crumbling, it's actually less secure than if you can hold a firm boundary and say, nope, these are the rules.
They wanted that discipline. Yeah.
If you're a dad and you can remember that, like, the kids actually need firm boundaries. Doesn't mean you have to be harsh. Right. I mean, it's just, this is the firm boundary. We're not crossing this line, and they'll push against it, but they could tell you're solid. And it actually makes them feel secure, makes them better self-esteem to have someone who can be that way. Sorry, you were going to talk. And
No. I'm glad you bring. That's such a great analogy of the wall crumbling, and I never really looked at it that way, but it makes like so much sense, because they'd come in. It was like a lot of they wanted attention, right? They wanted somebody, and it wasn't like, they were going to get attention, and if they had, whether it was a positive or a negative thing that they had to do to get it, what they wanted, I don't want to say crying out, but they were crying out. They wanted somebody to listen, and I was willing to listen. And then next thing you know, the district came in. There was 10 high schools in this district. District came down and says, "Hey, we need you to hold a class for the teachers." You understand I'm a sub, right? I'm not a full-time faculty member at any of these high schools. They're like, well, would you've made an effect on the school. You're being, people are talking about you. Okay. They're like, we'll give you an hour to teach a class. I said, I need 10 minutes. They're like, well, you can have an hour. Great. I'm only going to need 10 minutes. And the teachers came in. There was 15 teachers that came in from different schools, and they all sat down like, who's this guy? Why is he so special? Blah, blah, blah. And after doing my little spiel intro, I said, here's the problem with you guys wonder why you have, and every teacher went down the line. They was like, well, my kids are bad. They're not listening. I can't get them to listen, blah, 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 blah. That's your problem. I said, and they're like, what's the problem? I was like, you're the one that's not listening. Oh, I pissed off every teacher that day. And I said, if you guys took 5 minutes, just 5 minutes with each kid, and listen to what they had to say, you would understand what they're going through, and you would have so much more of an effect on their lives in a positive way, as opposed to just going in every day. And listen, I respect teachers. It's hard. It's a very hard job. But if you want to be a teacher, and those of you that are out there that are listening, because I know I have teachers out there, and I love you, but listen to your students. You want to make an effect on it. I want to be a teacher because I want to make an effect on a child's life. Good. Listen. Stop talking and listen. That's my advice. Because if you do that, it rolls into everything else, in my opinion, because you don't know what that kid's going through. If that kid's not involved, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Adam, no, I love that. Even there was a guy named Stephen Covey years ago who wrote this book, and he said, if you really want to be able to influence anybody to go anywhere, you have to do exactly what you said right there. Just listen, understand first. And sometimes even as dads or parents, we're saying, well, you need to understand what I'm saying. No, I love how you said that. Just listen. The other thing that came to mind here as you were talking is just, I heard somebody else say, if we don't have enough good parents, there will never be enough police officers or courts or anything else. If you don't have enough parents, like, and here's another quote that I'm probably misquoting, but I'll say it anyway. It's something along these lines. It says, if we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. Think about that. If we don't fix marriages and families, parenting, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. In other words, in the world, there's this idea that like, okay, it's this politician's fault, or it's this politician's fault, or this politician will help us. And I'm not saying you can't do some good in politics, or it's this social program. We need more of this or less of this, or more of this or less of this, or, it's this political party's fault or this political party's fault, or whatever it is. But the truth is, the real root, have you ever heard, for every 1,000 people hacking at the leaves, there's one hacking at the root. The real root of the problem is that we need good dads, good parents to step up and say, I'm going to teach my kids, because the problems we see in society happen decades before because there was an absent dad who didn't say, hey, you need to step up. It's not that we don't have enough police, or too many police, or not a little of us police, or too many of this or too many of that. Or, we could go down that thing. And again, I'm not discounting the good efforts of people who are in politics or anything like that. I'm just saying the real root, not the leaves, the root of the problem is that we need good dads, good parents who step up to the plate. And so, man, I love that you're passionate about this, Adam. Really appreciate this.
X, you're saying something, the root, and that something just clicked with me, and I have to get this off my chest. And how was I going to say it now? It's one of those.
I know. Yeah, sometimes you think
here it is. No, here it is. Let me ask you this. Your father, you got 5 kids. I'm assuming they're in extracurricular activities. You probably know other parents. You've probably met other, whether they're single parents or whatnot. You probably know someone. Have you ever heard a parent give an excuse? Well, like, I can't always be there for this, that, because I have a job, this and that and the other thing. And I get that when I hear that, but here's my take on it. And this isn't the best advice per se, but this is Adam Bird's logic of thinking when it comes to parenting. So I'm going to share this with you because it was my own personal experience. There was a point when my son got into junior high, and he started doing extracurricular activities. Had a house, had a car payment. It was just me. I wasn't getting child support. None of that stuff. Wasn't getting any help for anybody. Needed a job. Got to keep a roof on over his head, food, clothes, etc. Right? But this is where the but is. I wasn't going to let anybody tell me what I can and can't do when it comes to my son. I quit my corporate job. This is not something I recommend doing. No money in the bank, nothing. This was like, this is where the God factor came in for me, is like, you got to take that
I love it, man. I love that you did that.
Leap of faith. Try not to get I still get emotional. It's been years too. Wow. You take that leap of faith, and I didn't worry about where the money was going to come from. I didn't worry about whether or not we were going to lose the house or not, because it didn't matter, because I knew it would work out the way that it's supposed to. And again, I'm not saying, not everybody has that opportunity or support or whatnot, but I made, I think my faith, obviously, number one, came into factor, and it allowed me to be a dad and a parent to my son. So when I hear parents say, well, I can't do this because I got a job, I got this, I got that. Listen, to me, you're missing faith in your life. You have to have, I get it. You have to pay the bills. I'm not saying don't pay your bills. I'm not saying that, folks. But I'm saying put your kids, next, obviously after your faith, put your kids first or second, and that aspect of it. And that's what I did. And I'm glad I did. My son turned 20 years old. He got a full ride scholarship to college. I didn't do that. He did. I laid the I'd like to take some credit and laid the foundation, but I don't even like taking that credit for doing that because he worked hard for that. He earned that. He wants to be a chaplain. How many, teenagers, 20-year-olds do you know that want to join the military to be a chaplain? I don't know very many. But I'd like to think that he's chosen that path in his life because of the way I raised him, I think.
And I'm sure you had a massive effect, probably more than you know, maybe even more than he knows.
I guess we'll see.
Such a great thing. I love what you said here. Do you really want to have more stuff that is going to get old fat? I mean, here's the deal. You can go buy the coolest car today. 5 years, it's not cool anymore. No. 10 years, it's really not cool anymore. 20 years, it doesn't matter. Wouldn't you rather just drive a 20-year-old car, but be a good dad and make a difference than say, I need to have this new stuff, but I'm going to neglect my kids? We make time for what's important. And I think that's such a great story of you saying, you know what? My son was more important than this corporate job I had.
Yeah.
I mean, good for you, Adam. Well, my hat's off to you. I mean, it's
stressful, but at the same time, I think you have to have faith. And the point of that is it's funny, X, because you and I, I'm a little more seasoned. Now that I'm getting up, there was a time in my 20s where it's like, you want the exotic cars and the big mansions and all that other hoopla stuff. I'll be 45 this year. And I don't care about any of that crap. Like, I'm happy like being in the woods or on the lake fishing or helping other people get to where they want to go or walking my dogs. I don't care about any of that other stuff. Is the other stuff cool? Would it be nice? No. Here's why it's not nice to have a big house anymore. One, I don't need it. And two, I certainly don't want to clean it. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I don't care. I don't need that stuff anymore. Like,
absolutely.
As you get older, your purpose comes more clear, and I'm blessed that mine has done that. So yeah, but parenting, best job in the world. Being a father, greatest job, hardest job in the world. Most rewarding job, I think, in the world.
You're doing such a great thing with this, Adam. I mean, seriously, the fact that you're helping people realize that.
I
so
think
awesome.
More people need to get into that. X, I want to change it up here a little bit because I know you and I could continue just talking about dad stuff and swapping dad stories.
Sure.
But you're a businessman yourself. And we got a little bit of time left, so I want to dive into your business side of things. What do you do? You mentioned that you go around, you speak and whatnot. So tell us a little bit about the business side of X.
Well, I did write. I wrote this book years ago. It was about how to get past gatekeepers to the decision maker when you're trying to sell to an organization or a small government or a big business. And a lot of things that people run into are. How do I get my idea in front of the right person? Right. You could sell somebody in the organization, but if they're not the decision maker, then it doesn't help. So I wrote a book about this. I was lucky. There was a lady, a really nice person at Forbes who picked up and wrote an article on it. And that helped me do a little bit of speaking and training around the country. Interesting thing, though, I've got to tell you, the main premise behind this book is actually something I'm going to circle back for a second.
Yeah.
That's a parenting principle. Okay. The parenting principle. I'm going to circle back because they're all interrelated.
Right,
okay. So
right.
There's this book. It was a super good book written by Glenn Latham. It's called The Path Book. Is that when you see a behaviors are kind of like seeds you would plant in the ground. Okay.
Okay.
And attention, like if you imagine I had a big pitcher of water in this hand and I'm watering the behaviors I want to see grow with attention. And so basically, if you see a behavior and you water it with attention, it eventually grows. Well, that's been found to be the most effective way to shape human behavior. And I'm going to tell you a parenting story, then I'm going to tell you a business story. And they're the same exact principle that we're using here. Okay. So, my daughter once, she gets up, she's probably 6 or 7 years old. She knocks on my door and says, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I made my lunch. I made my bed. I got ready for school. I just wanted to surprise you. And I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. And I just learned about this positive reinforcement where you got to like give attention for the good behaviors, right? Well, I went to my wife in the closet and I said, hey, let's give this a lot of attention. Let's see if we can make it. So I went out there and I'm like, wow, your bed looks good. You made your lunch. We didn't even have to ask you. Wow. And I just laid it on really thick. Right. And it was sincere. I was just trying to praise her for good behavior. My wife did it too. And well, guess what happened? She did it again.
Yeah.
And she did it again. Well, what a lot of parents fall into is they fall into this trap of like pointing out what their kids aren't doing right. Now it's okay to point that out, but I'm saying if you're focusing it on all the time. So, you see the parent and the kid walks in, the parent's like, well, I can't believe you stayed out till 3 a.m. and you didn't make your bed and you're hanging out with the wrong kids. Well, what that parent is inadvertently doing is they're watering the behaviors they don't want to see grow with attention. They're watering the weeds. Well, anyway, I can tell you my daughter, she's a good girl. I mean, she's just a good girl, but I'm saying she ended up, doing this all the time where she just get up, make her bed, get ready. And I really believe that principle works. Well, you can use it in business. Yes. Let me give you an example. Okay. I mean, just sincerely catching people doing something. I'm not saying being insincere, like sincerely waiting till they do something good and then giving them real attention for really good behavior. So here's a business story. You ready?
Yeah.
Well, I'll back up. I'm at this bank. And I had a problem with my account. Well, I'll tell you, here's the problem. I didn't put money in the account when I should have put money in the account. It was in the red. Okay. And I go into this bank, this was years ago, and I go in and I was concerned because I had all these overdraft fees. And I went in and the guy there said, he was really nice. I put the money in like I should have. He waived a bunch of the fees. And when he was done, I looked at him and I said, hey, can I get the email to your boss? And he looked at me kind of funny, like, why do you want the email to my boss? And I said, I'm just going to tell him what a great job you did. I really appreciate it. And he said, you could tell he wasn't used to that. He's like, okay. And he gave me the email to his boss. So I went home that night and I typed up a little email that said something like this: Dear Mr. Branch Manager, I had the opportunity of working with Jeff. He was very professional and helpful. I think he deserves a raise and a promotion. And I sent that to his boss and I copied Jeff on it. Didn't take him, it took 3 minutes.
Right.
Well, I didn't think anything else about it. He was nice for me. He did this. Well, here's the funny thing. I went back to the same bank and I live in an area where there's quite a few people. I mean, it's a fairly decent sized city. People don't really know each other just because, in smaller towns, people know everybody, but in this is kind of a larger, bigger place. And I'm standing in line. There's like 10 people in front of me at this bank and something happened that never happened before. I'm standing in line and somebody comes up to me and it was not Jeff and it wasn't the branch manager, but they come up to me and they knew my name and they said, Mr. Anderson. And I said, yeah, I was kind of surprised. He goes, can I help you with your banking? And I go, well, sure. And he goes, follow me. He took me from the back of the line, let me do my banking in front of everybody else. You would have thought I had $10 million at the bank, which we all know we all know I didn't, right? And it happened again and again and again where they treat me like this king, and it didn't start happening until I did this thing at the bank. Well, here, let me fast forward this. Okay, so after I wrote this letter, I asked people, I go, why did that happen? And they're like, well, Jeff probably told people around the water cooler. Now everybody wants you to write a letter to him or something. I mean, I don't know, right? But fast forward, like a few years after this, I'm sitting in New York. Okay, I do sales. I'm sitting in New York. I'm sitting across this table from a higher level director in New York, and this guy looks at me and he goes, and I was surprised, by the way, when he said this. He goes, "You're the only salesperson I've ever let into my office," and I was surprised. And he said, and then he said something really, really interesting, which I won't tell you exactly what he said just yet. But what do you think I did to get in there? I'll ask people that, and here's the answer. It was the exact same thing I did at the bank, but just being sincere. Like what happened is I sent this director an email. He totally ignored me, didn't even call me back. I called in a few days later to talk to him. His secretary picked up the phone. I said, hey, can I speak with Bob? She said, he's unavailable. They always say that, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, maybe what I could do is just resend the email I sent before and copy it to you. Would that be okay? And she said, sure. And then I noticed like this secretary, she was genuinely just friendly. She kind of had this fun, bubbly, happy personality. And I just said, I talk to people on the phone all day long. And I meant it sincerely. I just said, it's just refreshing to talk to someone who's as nice as you are. Thank you. I was trying, and I meant it.
Yeah.
And then I said, and as I was pulling up the email, I said, I'm going to mention that to your boss. And I did. I typed really fast. I said, Dear Bob, had the opportunity of speaking with Janice. She was very professional and helpful. I think I think she's an asset to your team. By the way, I'm going to be in New York on these days. And I sent it to Bob, her boss. And the first line was a compliment about her. And it was sincere. And I said, hey, did that email come through? And she said, let me check. And there was a little pause. And she said, yeah, it came through. And then she said, and then there was another little pause. She goes, thanks for the compliment. I said, well, I meant it. I mean, I appreciate you being so positive.
Right on.
That was what, let's fast forward back to where I'm sitting across from this high level director. He looks at me and he goes, you know, you're the only salesperson I've led into my office. Yeah. And the reason you're here is because you were nice to my secretary. I talk to my secretary more than I talk to my wife. And some of these sales guys don't understand that. I thought that was really interesting. It was just me pointing something out. Now it's the same principle. Listen to this, whether it's catching my daughter doing something right and giving her attention, or just Janice, who's on the phone, who's just being friendly and just giving her attention for it. That same principle of just positive reinforcement, it works at work.
Yeah.
It works with your children.
Oh, it's amazing.
It works with your spouse. I mean, it works everywhere. And so I'm pretty passionate about, let's catch people doing something right, and let's catch our kids doing something right instead of always harassing them for what they're doing wrong. And even in business, like what are people doing right? And they found, even research-based, that catching people doing something right is like the most effective way to shape human behavior long-term. I mean, anyway, you got me going on this.
No, keep going, man, because you're creating a positive result from it.
Yeah.
And you're what am I trying to say? You're putting out positive energy into the universe, right? And it's, how simple is it just to take 5 minutes to say thank you for being polite? That could have made her day. That, she could have, and just saying thank you to somebody, or opening a door for someone, when you're walking into a building, or little small things. We all think that we need to be doing these great things. Here's what you do. The little things count, folks, I think is, and correct me if I'm wrong, X, but I'm going to start doing that. Yeah, I'm going to challenge myself now to start any type of interaction that I have with other professionals, business, whether it's through email or when I'm out and about at the bank or at one of my clients, restaurants or whatnot. Hey, you know what?
People need it.
Thank you. Yeah, because you don't know what that person's going through, and just a simple thank you. And look what it does for you from a business standpoint. And I think if you're a business owner, you should be doing that for your people anyway, because you might not be in business if it wasn't for the people helping you out anyway.
You're right. And, I think if you just try to do it, it's kind of fun. Just like, let me just give you one more example.
Yeah, please.
I'm at the oil change place, and I've learned about this. I'm like, okay, these guys came and they vacuumed out the car and they Windexed the windows and they changed my oil really fast. And I'm like, you know what? That's a behavior that I think is an awesome, good behavior. So I did the same thing. I'm like, hey, go get your boss over here. So the boss comes over and the kids are kind of like, what? And I, right there in front of the kids, I go, hey, you know what? These guys did a phenomenal job. They vacuumed it fast. They were professional. I asked them questions. They were just these are exactly the kind of employees you want working for you. When you get promoted, will you drag these guys into your spot? And the kids were just kind of like, did this guy just do that? And there was nothing I could get out of it. It's just to try to help that. But it was really interesting. I went back to that same oil change place and they remembered my name, and I don't even have to bring the coupon. They're like, give that guy half off, and it was one of those things where it's like, stuff starts to happen when you start seeing the good in people. And it really is the most powerful way to affect. Now I'm going to bring that back to one parenting. Listen, you just got me on a roll, man.
No,
sorry,
go, man.
You asked such good questions.
Run with it.
Okay. So you've seen parents, sometimes they get really frazzled because their kids are tantruming. If you have a 2 or 3 year old kid or 5, and he's screaming, but the parents often don't realize that they're playing into this. So remember, whatever you give attention to, you make bigger. So I've seen parents, the kid is just screaming in the middle of the store. But the parent right there is giving him all kinds of attention. Like, what do you need, sweetheart? Do you need a candy? Do you need something? Let me, can you be quiet? You're embarrassing mommy or daddy right here in the store and blah, 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 blah. And the kid's screaming and the parent is like watering this behavior with tons of attention. Every time the kid tantrums, the parent's like, well, how can I fix it? How can I help you? Well, they found, and by the way, back to this book, Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham, goes, look, when kids are acting up, and they will, right?
Yep.
We just have a conversation with them. We say, hey, look, when you act that way, you get to sit in the corner. What they basically need is zero attention.
Yep.
Like, so you put them in the corner and you do it nicely. You don't have to be mean or harsh about it. You can just say, hey, when you're going to tantrum like this, you can just sit in the corner. Now, you don't send them to their bedroom where they can play video games because that's kind of reinforcing in itself. You need zero reinforcement. So they have to be bored to death sitting in the corner. Okay. Well, what happens is sometimes the kid will scream for like 8-9 minutes and the parent can't handle it. So the parent's like, I'm just going to go over and give him attention. And what did they just teach the kid? They taught the kid, if you scream for 8 or 9 minutes, you'll get mom's attention. Yep. Well, what they need to do is wait for the kid to burn out. Like he can sit in the corner for 25 minutes until he burns out. And then as soon as he's acting nice, the parent can go give him attention for the good behavior and say, you know what? I love it when you play nicely with your brother, or I love it when you're being calm and happy like this, and give him a big hug. And what happens is if they do that consistently, now if somebody's been tantruming for a while, it might take a few weeks to do this, but like if you do it consistently, it's not long before the kid figures out, hey, I don't get any of mom's and dad's attention when I'm acting like this, but when I'm acting good, I get tons of attention. And the parent can actually help get rid of these tantrums. But see, just taking the time to say, I'm going to go spend an hour reading The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. So I have this like extra tool in my head. That sometimes can have massive payoffs. All the stress that they've had for years of tantruming, by just thinking about something or taking a little time to learn a new parenting technique, man, it could change their whole parenting style, their whole career, the whole feeling of the house, the whole feeling of the family, the whole feeling of the home. And so like, I'm just saying, you know what? You're probably doing a lot of things right as a dad or a mom. And there might be like 1 or 2 tweaks that if you just learn, like, okay, I'm not going to give attention to that behavior, but I'm going to catch him doing something right, could change the whole feeling of your home. And so you're not that far away from having a more peaceful or happy home. But take the time to, as Stephen Covey says, sharpen the saw. Sometimes we're sawing so fast, we're like, I don't have any time to sharpen the saw. He's like, no, sometimes you need to step back and figure out how to make the saw sharper, figure out how to be a little bit better parent, and things will change.
I love
Adam, you're so good to listen to me, man. You're a great interviewer. This podcast is so amazing. Like, I usually don't talk this long, but you've got such good questions and good comments, man. What a great thing you're doing.
Listen, no, this is all you, brother. This is all you. It's so true. I want to point something out here real quick. Nowhere in what X was just saying, ladies and gentlemen, did he say, your kid's tantruming, just give them your iPad or your Game Boy or anything like that. It's not parenting. Just wanted to throw that out there because of the world that we live in. And I know there's somebody that's listening to this that just struck a nerve. You're welcome. So that's X. We're coming up on time, brother. Those that are listening that want to work with you or find more about you and whatnot, go ahead, give them where you want people to go, where they follow you and whatnot.
They could go to EksAyn.com. I've got this wild first name. Like, there's nobody named EksAyn unless they're in my family. So if you just Google EksAyn, which is my first name, there's lots of different social media. I mean, you can follow me on social media or things, but I do a podcast that is actually, I need to learn from you. Your podcast is so awesome. But there's a few things people can do. But if you just look me up on just EksAyn or Google me, EksAyn.com.
Hold on. You bring up a podcast. What's the podcast called?
Principal Podcast.
Okay. And I'm assuming podcast. They can listen to that where all podcasts are their favorite podcasts, right?
They can listen to that. Listen to Adam Bird. That's what you need to listen to. You're a great interview, man.
Listen, I got one more question for you. You're on a show called The Decision Hour, and we make decisions every day. But X, there's one decision that you probably think about that stands out. Your feet are on the line. You have to make that decision. What is it? And what was the atmosphere like for you at that time?
Oh, you mean one decision?
You have to you name a time in your life where your feet were on the line and you had to make that decision. What was it? And what was the atmosphere like for you at that time?
You know, things that come to mind, and I'll tell you this, Adam. You know, there was a time where I was a single parent, and hard time, hard time. But to stay involved in my child's life, no matter what it cost, no matter what it did, that was a decision that I'm so glad I made to stay involved. So when I hear you tell your story, I'm moved, I'm touched. I feel like, you know, there's a lot of dads who could say, you know, I'm in this situation, it's hard, what do I do? Stay involved. And that's one decision that I'm grateful I've made.
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I appreciate your time and wisdom in sharing with our listeners today. So, everybody, we're up on time right now. Go check out X's website. We'll have that in the show notes, EksAyn.com. Also, make sure you go check out our parent network, Heroes Media Group. Go check out all the great shows that we have over there. We got new content. Pretty soon here, we will have events that we have coming up over the next 6 months where we're going to be. So don't be shy. Go out and meet the crew and everything there, heroesmediagroup.com. That's all the time I got for today, folks. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.